come in.
Hey.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Fostering Success Michigan Toolkit webinar series. We're so happy to have you joining us today. Our featured webinar is going to be highlighting, if we can move forward. Oh, okay, sorry, standby technical difficulties. Oh, there we go. My name is Maddie Dana. I'm the Director of Outreach and Training here with the Center for Fostering Success at Western Michigan University. A couple housekeeping tips. We have all of you in listen-only mode, but we do want you to join us using the chat feature. You'll see on your sidebar there are there's a chat feature, there's a questions feature. You can use either of those to send us questions at any point in time throughout this recording. If you have any difficulties, this is a number for the Citrix team. Feel free to contact them. This recording will be available later on this week on the Fostering Success Michigan webinar or website. Please know that the webcam video will not be available with this recording. So all of you out there watching us live, you get to see our smiling faces. All of you that might be listening later get to hear our lovely voices. And thank you everyone for joining us. We're so pleased to have our special guest, Vaughn Washington, here with us, Executive Director, Community Relations with the Kalamazoo Promise. I'm sure many of you know Vaughn. He's been an educator in our community for a very long time, and his work with the Kalamazoo Promise has just been amazing, very much a leader in this work, a leader in our education field, and we are very honored to have him with us today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Our toolkit today is the peeling back the red tape to understand the foster care experience for educators. And this is going to highlight our FSM Child Welfare for Educators Toolkit. This is a toolkit that we have actually developed with educators. Vaughn is one of the folks that we have developed this toolkit with. Others, I want to just send a quick shout out to Brenda Pickett, the former coordinator for the Kalamazoo College and Career Access Network. She was a huge part of putting this toolkit together. And a huge inspiration for us as we were working with this. This toolkit is great for principals, teachers, educators, anybody that's in an education setting. We understand that also might mean, paraprofessionals, supportive adults, maybe even some caregivers and relatives, parents that are out there that are, volunteering in the schools and trying to figure out, with your students who experience foster care, how to kind of blend those worlds we know are often siloed between child welfare and education. And so our goal through this webinar is to really build awareness, to provide some suggestions, and really to build some bridges between those silos. Before we go on, I just want to say, as with all of our webinars, these wouldn't be able to happen without tremendous support from Western Michigan University, the Havermill Foundation, and the Kresge Foundation. They're all great advocates for this work and really believers that we can actually build those bridges and take down those silos for our students. So let's get started. What you see on your screen here is a definition of foster care, a very general definition. And what I want to highlight is that while foster care is something that, we kind of talk about in the abstract, for the young people who experience foster care, the experience of foster care varies, living arrangements can vary, the reasons why they were in foster care vary, but there's some things that are very common among the experience for those students, and really that comes down to the fact that students were put into foster care not because of something that they did, but because of things that were going wrong in their home. And many of our students sort of struggle with the stigma of foster care, feeling like if people know that they're in foster care, that maybe they might be judging them, they might be really thinking, oh, that I did something wrong. And unfortunately, with the emergent nature of foster care. This is an emergency service oftentimes. Young people being removed without much notice. Young people aren't given a lot of context as to, why they're put into foster care, how long they're going to be in foster care. They may know that maybe things weren't, always right at home, but they didn't know that that was going to lead to them being separated from their caregivers. So we do have some common family issues listed here, and I just want to, say and just make very clear that these issues are not necessarily the cause for young people to go into foster care, but they may be common issues that young people who are in foster care have experienced in their family of origin. Just understanding that alcoholism, mental illness, addiction, homelessness, these are systemic issues that are really part of the cycle of poverty, and for our young people, that cycle is something that many of their families are caught in. So what is a foster care placement? I think it's always interesting when you talk to young people. We obviously talk to older young people, and their experiences definitely vary. We see a lot of, for our high school age and even some middle school age young people, they're in group home settings, they're in residential treatment settings. So when we talk about foster care for our older young people, they may actually not be in families. And so for those of you educators out there, understanding that when a child is coming into your classroom, they may not be coming from a family or a situation where a parent has said, okay, have a good day, we'll see you at the end of the day. It may be a different caregiver who is going to be off in between shifts before the young person comes back. So the caregiver that sent them off to school may not be the caregiver that is going to see them when they come back from school. So just understanding that there are a variety of these placements, but the purpose of foster care really is to be a place where young people can be safe, where families can get the supportive services that they need, and hopefully there will be reunification. Though we know that for our older young people in foster care, reunification, permanency through adoption and guardianship does become less likely of an outcome. So for those of you, working with our high school age young people, just understand that they may be in a time of great transition. Their life outside of school may also include just some of the harsh realities of coming to terms with the fact that you may not be going back to your parents. You may not be going back to a home that you knew or a community that you knew, and you may be staying in something that doesn't feel permanent. So who are students who experience foster care? They look just like every student, and I'm sure, Vaughn, any in your years in the schools, maybe sometimes you could choose, you could kind of say, I think maybe that kid's in foster care, but I'm guessing that by and large, you probably didn't necessarily know unless a young person identified. Yeah. And our students in foster care are also are often referred to as an invisible population, in that they have every identity of every other student. They are our students of color. They are our first generation students, our underserved populations of students, our low income populations of students. They are refugees. They do experience homelessness. They are boys. They are girls. They are transgender. They are GLBTQ. They have all of the identities that every other student has, and then on top of that, they have this experience of foster care that often really makes them feel so isolated, because there's not probably a group at a school, at a high school maybe, that you've worked with that is a foster care pride group per se, just like there may be with LGBTQ groups. So if you identify with this background of foster care, often you don't know who else out there might be like you.
Very true.
So who may be involved in a child's case? This is a list of just a few people that may be involved. One thing that I want to say, we added teachers to this, and this has actually been something through legislation that has happened. I want to say it was early 2013, President Obama signed the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. And this legislation actually allowed caseworkers to work with teachers and education staff directly involved in the education stability and education progress for that student. So I know many of you, we're we're in a room with light sensitive light sensitive lights. That's okay. It's all eco-friendly. Um, so, I know for many of you teachers out there, you may be looking at this list and saying, I've never been asked to be involved in the case of a child, and hopefully we'll start to see that change. Hopefully more teachers will be involved, and in a huge way, I think it's so important that teachers are involved because you're spending so much time with our students. Yeah. And, one of the things I can just say anecdotally, I talk to many young people who are in college often, and I ask them, hey, how did you get to college, and how did you, persist through the many obstacles that we know happen along the way to make it here. And so often they say, it was one person, and it was so often an educator, a coach. I know you have been a coach, and the power of having a coach in your life. I'm sure you've seen that with many of your students. Just having somebody who says, I see you, I got you. Maybe you don't have all the answers, but we're gonna figure this out, and so for all of you teachers out there, really understanding what a huge role you play. So lastly, just some challenges here in the education settings for students who experience foster care. These are probably not going to look surprising to any of you. Lack of education stability. We know that students move a number of times because of their placements, and then with each move, there's roughly 4 to 6 months of school lost in those moves. High absences of school, often this is due to, again, placement instability. So if you're changing school to school, this may also be due to mandatory visits, court appointments with therapists and other folks that are necessary to be a part of the legal case, but maybe taking time out of that child's school time. This all, of course, leads to poor academic performance, loss of credit due to school moves, challenges in peer relationships, and again, all of these are really just kind of iterative. You start to have the school instability, absences, academic performance, all of these things kind of come with just sort of one of those dominoes being knocked over. And then you see the problem behaviors, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but Vaughn and I were having a conversation beforehand that, these problem behaviors, sometimes students are having problem behaviors, and, maybe we need to do a better job, or to even just ask that question, hey, what's going on at home? But asking that question is no simple feat. Asking that question may get you into a whole larger situation that you may not feel prepared for. So we want to help you feel prepared to address the needs of those students. All right, so that brings us to our conversation today, and I just want to say thank you again for being here. It's always wonderful to have the expert of experts with us. So I want to dive in, and I want to hear from you, Vaughn. What are some of the common challenges faced by educators and education staff in working with students from foster care?
Oh my goodness, and thank you for having me, and I'll qualify right now. I'm no expert. It's nice to be considered someone that may know a bit about this, but one thing is for sure, in education, we're really all in this together, and those challenges that these students are facing are similar to many of the other students. I really don't know that I could list out anything beyond what was on that list, but you name it, from where your next meal is going to come from, to how you're getting to school, to what it looks like after school, to challenges you may face with peers in school. Each of these things just compound. They add up. And once they add up and get to a certain point, then other behaviors start to take place. And I think it's very significant for everyone to understand that, any of us knows this is a capacity issue in a lot of ways. If we could deal with a student one-on-one,
right,
for the most part, we know that a lot of us would be very successful. But the fact is that there are a lot of students in a lot of situations that we face each and every day in a school setting that mean we have to extend ourselves, stretch ourselves to a maximum, and we're not always able to get deep enough when talking with a student to understand whether they're not in a foster care situation or what their home life looks like.
And I think that the capacity issue is just such a brilliant point, because I know for those folks on the child welfare side, they're feeling that capacity of, I have this caseload. Not only do they have the youth, but they also have the parents and foster parents and the courts and all of that. But similarly, our partners in this work on the education side, have 30 students in a classroom. I mean, just,
Oh, even, and sometimes even more.
I mean, and I can only imagine that, as you said, when these challenges stack up, probably even just choosing at what point do I try to address this is overwhelming,
Absolutely. Relationships, we talk a lot about relationships, and as an administrator and or a person that was working with student supports at one time, just the number one answer for students who are struggling and or teachers who are dealing with numbers of struggling students is building relationships. And how many relationships can you build?
Right.
And you could have 100 students on your class rosters throughout any given day.
Sure.
And if a majority of those students need that extra attention, and what we're finding is more and more students on our rosters need that extra special attention, how deep can you really go to find out where a student is and some of the deep-seated issues that they're having outside of a school or in school that help them, or that get in the way of them performing and being a part of the school system in a way that they know they want to be and really flourish from all of the academic support and all the people that are there to help them.
Yeah. I mean, such a great point. I think, especially for our educators in high schools, that, students are probably coming in for an hour a day, and you're sort of seeing them. And I'm sure just kind of going like, can I even dive in with this relationship? And I would have to imagine there's a level of vulnerability too. When you're an educator and you're feeling overwhelmed, that means that if you take that extra step to create that relationship with that young person, that you have to be vulnerable to them. And you have to be real, because we know our students, if you're not being real, they're going to call you out. They're not going to have any of that. And so that's an extra challenge of, okay, not only are you doing all of your duties, but then, you have to be real and vulnerable to this student, and the pain that they might bring into that relationship, the hurt that they might be experiencing, is very real for our educators. So
yeah, and what we found with many people is that one, they would avoid the question. So in building a relationship with a student, on a lot of occasions, you wouldn't ask some of those deeper questions. One, you thought maybe you were violating the student by asking them certain things about their living situation, and two, you really don't want to ask questions that you don't have answers for.
That's a good point.
Some of the information that's here, I mean, the majority of this information that has been providing today is just critical. And a lot of information that I didn't know was available, it may not have been available at the time. The work that you guys are doing now, you and your team, is remarkable. And to take that and then be able to put that into a school environment really can be beneficial, because over the years, recent years, behaviors were at an all-time level. They were increased. The behavior that we were seeing today is far different than the behavior that may have been seen even 10 years ago, and it continues to change. And so as an administrator, I was looking for, extra arms, extensions, folks that were in the building that could help work with a student that was having a particular situation. We did not really have a place at a particular time where I said, if I found out you were in foster care, go to this place.
Right.
Basically, we would continue to work with you, try to see what we could do to provide those supports for you. But, nothing tangible, nothing fully scripted out on what that would look like. And when you look at the data for students that are in foster care, you find out that they are somewhat more likely than their peers to potentially have behavior issues. Those issues acting out, or however people want to define them, you can have some behavior issues. Knowing that, then, to have that identification, and then there are resources to help would really be, okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's it first. No, would be very beneficial. What would you do if the lights went out in your classroom, right? That'd be something else. So knowing that these resources are available is very important.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I just think such a good point, and also just a place of awareness for everyone involved, the dynamics that our educators are facing. So let's talk about some of the supports. And so really, we're going to present the toolkit that we've built, but I wonder if you could share just some ideas about the various supports that you know from an education side, maybe some of the natural supports available in schools, or some of the things that we might not think about just in the community or what have you, that would be of support for our educators and education staff working with students with experience in foster care in the classroom.
Well, so many people are concerned with this in the community and on the outside, that there are many folks that are doing great work to try to provide that. I was very fortunate at the Kalamazoo Public Schools to be working with a group called Communities in Schools. And Communities in Schools provided quite an extensive plan for working with students that struggle. Now, whether you were in foster care or not, you were able to benefit from the work that Communities in Schools was doing. But because of their work and because of the folks that they had on staff, they had a very high likeliness to get to that level that might help you know whether or not someone's in foster care.
Sure.
Because they were doing that work after school. They did have on-site coordinators as well, where students could go if they had issues during the school day. When you have those resources during the school day, which typically in the past used to be the guidance counselor, right? The guidance counselor was a place you could go, talk about a number of issues. They are trained professionals to listen, to understand, and to advise you. But they even have large caseloads now when it comes to scheduling students.
Yeah.
And so some of the work that they were able to do in the past now is just not available to them per the amount of time that they have and the number of students that they're working with. So creative solutions are very, very important. Folks like Communities in Schools become extremely important to you. And they were able to help you get to that level and understand where they were. We also have other folks that were student support specialists. We have parapros in our schools. These folks are all people that are tasked on any given day with building in-depth relationships, helping understand where students are coming from and what those struggles are, and then helping them overcome those barriers. Every educator in the building is trying to do the best they can to see that all students succeed. It becomes that capacity and that depth issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the partnerships, you were totally on it, because we were going to ask about partnerships next, and so this is perfect to talk about how essential those partnerships are, those spaces like the after school space, and how that can be leveraged to provide that additional support that a student may need around that relationship support. And I just wonder, you have many years of working with students, many years of coaching. Do you have any kind of tried and true relationship building tricks that you go to?
I think you mentioned it at one point, being extremely real. And you're going to have to give up a little piece of yourself to get pieces of others. And so that doesn't mean telling them people all your personal business or anything like that. I don't want to suggest that, but you're going to have to show that you are human as well. A lot of times there's just this thought that you were trained to do this, you went to school for this, then you're supposed to take everything that comes your way, without having any reaction to it. And we're human. Everybody working in the profession is human and trying to do their best. The faster that students understand that you are human and that you have some vulnerabilities and that all you are trying to do is help them move forward. You've seen some things, you've learned some lessons, and you want to help them move forward in as genuine a way as you can. That starts building that relationship. Very little trust going on between young people and adults. But we still know that in schools, we're still, we're running the school still. They come to school, the doors are open, they're coming in. And so schools still have that feeling, if you will, that this is the place that you're supposed to be. This is the place that can advance my station in life. And I need to be here because everyone in the world is telling me, go to school. From those in my family who are adults that didn't go to school to those that did. So they know that they need to be here. And so those partnerships that we work with and the support staff of students are extremely important. And the thing about it is You have to be in it to win it.
Mhm.
No false, let me just do this so I can get past the day. Really, we are building on day after day after day
Mhm.
to make sure that we're successful.
Yeah, and I think it's such a good point that you have to be in it, not just for the moment, but for the long haul. And,
Absolutely.
with our students from foster care, that may be a couple weeks, that may be, years that they are going to look to you to kind of say like, hey, is this what I should be doing? Or is this for me? A lot of our students from foster care say it was that educator who said, college is for you. Hey, this, you don't get a pass on this whole college application week thing. You got to be here too,
That's right.
But I think that also means that there might be some broken hearts, when you, invest a lot in a student and, they maybe all of a sudden stop showing up at school and you may not know why. And that can hurt, I mean, just knowing that you've invested in that relationship, and not knowing the end of that story. I know that's a very real part, but I think that understanding even that investment, even for that short time or however long as you have with a student, that seed is so important. And planting that seed in a genuine way is so important.
Absolutely. We are understanding that students come with a different set of issues
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
very important. And the more you can understand about particular issues that students may come through the door with, the better off you are. It's just like
Yeah.
cultural sensitivity and
Mm-hmm.
or situational
Mm-hmm.
sensitivity, if you will.
Sure.
The better off you are, or you're much better off if you have an understanding of some of those things that they may be feeling, feelings of
Yeah.
rejection,
Mm-hmm.
feelings of, am I wanted here? Abandonment. You never know.
Yeah,
And what
absolutely.
do you do as an educator once you understand someone is feeling that way?
Right, which is another great segue to our next question and our last question for you before we look at the toolkit. But resources, and there's many resources that educators have access to. Of course, we're going to show you our toolkit, but other thoughts that you have about resources that educators can utilize to support their students with experience in foster care.
We're fortunate in the district to have a lot of folks, once again, from the outside. And a lot of times when you're working in a school, you feel like everything that's available to you is here. And so then when you don't see something, you don't feel like it's available at all. But
Mm-hmm.
there are so many community resources that are out there. And they are resources that you can come in contact with without fear of, am I talking too much? Am I telling somebody about a kid or
Sure.
something like that?
Good point.
You can share situations without sharing sensitive information to get a better understanding. So whether it's the Department of Human Services, whether it's not the folks over at Griffin Place that help with
Mm-hmm.
grief counseling, you name it, there are a number of outside resources. If you are not aware of those, then I would get right to my local administrator in my building and say, if we have these particular situations, what does this look like? And we're so used to taking situations as they hit us day to day.
Mm-hmm.
If this never came up, we would never ask the question on how to solve the issue.
Mm-hmm.
We probably should start asking ahead of time, just in case. Suppose I have this in my class. Suppose I come across this individual. How do I solve this? How do I solve that? A contingency plan for each one of these puts us in a better space to be able to react when it happens
Mm-hmm.
than to be trying to backpedal from it. And that's why things like the toolkit, getting in front of it right away for educators,
Mm-hmm.
is really a must.
Yeah, I think it's better it's on every level. It's better to be proactive than reactive.
Absolutely.
And I think you bring up a good point of, you have to anticipate that this may come up. And so ask those questions early. What resources do we have in our community? I know 2-on-1 is a great resource for many, many things here in Michigan. Just being familiar with how to navigate that online, calling them, seeing, what support can be offered. I would also imagine that there's, professional development opportunities that come up, maybe even not specifically on students from foster care, but professional development around how do you build those authentic relationships, or how do you support a family that may be struggling.
Absolutely. And so let's just even take it back and say, this is probably happening. If you're an
Mm-hmm.
educator, You probably have somebody, whether you know it or not, that's in foster care.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you'll know the numbers better than I, Maddie, you and your team, but you probably have someone that's in foster care. Does that change anything about what you're doing right now? So if you're just discovering right now that there is probably a chance that you have multiple children that may be in foster care situations, does that change your thought right now? Does it change your attitude? Do you ever think that any of the students that may be having disciplinary issues might be in foster care? And if that's the case, how does that change
Right.
your thoughts or your attitudes? And how would you approach them if you knew there were tools and strategies that are tried and true that could help you work with that student? So those are some of the things that you kind of want to ask yourself ahead of time. But I guess, I didn't want to leave anybody thinking that you're probably not dealing with it. You probably are.
Right.
No matter where you are, you're probably dealing with this situation right now
Absolutely.
and just not aware of it.
Yeah. And, I think that's such a good point. So often we think, oh, well, there's no one, from foster care in my classroom. And it's like, well, they might just not have told you. And, I go all over and talk to a variety of different people, and they'll say, I've never met a student who's been in foster care. I'm like, oh, you have? They just haven't told you because they look just like every other student. And maybe because there wasn't a space created where they could say, hey, this is my experience, and so I think inviting those conversations, thinking about it from there is probably a student in my classroom right now that is either in foster care right now or has experience in foster care, and how can I create a space of awareness, and how can I create a space in conversations that we're having, whether it's conversations around, what do you do when you go home, who's helping you with your homework, talking about family traditions, all of these other things that a student who's in foster care may not feel like they can fully participate in those conversations because it might out their experience. And so thinking broader about, how you approach some of those things to make sure that that student knows you're supposed to be here. This is your space. You're included here.
Yeah, and quite frankly, a lot of the students, the majority of students that you might start to build that relationship and dig deeper with are students that are experiencing issues in school. So for a student that comes, is doing well academically, not having any behavioral issues or anything, you probably don't get to know them to the same degree as you do a student who is experiencing issues. And so having an idea about students having issues, and maybe there are some more layers, can only help an educator to try to, attack some of those things.
Yeah. Perfect. So we are now going to jump into our Child Welfare Educators Toolkit. Again, this toolkit, as it's loading here, this toolkit is available on the fosteringsuccessmichigan.com website. You can search Child Welfare for Educators. You can search Toolkit. This toolkit will pop right up. All of our toolkits are marked when you see them. When you do a general search, they're marked with a little red toolkit icon, so you can always look for that as well. So as we look at this toolkit here, I'm not going to go over everything. I want to highlight some things so that you can go back and you can reference. But my hope is that, you can flag this, you can, bookmark this, and this is something that you can refer back to. Also share this. Please, share this resource with others. We, with Fostering Success Michigan, absolutely believe sharing is caring. Sort of how we come at everything. And so we hope that you share this and that you give us feedback. We are very open to hearing from you. How did this work in real time? What was missing? What did you like, or what would you like to have us, speak more to? Understanding that, we try to keep these comprehensive and yet brief, and that may not always work. So as we scroll through here, we start off with kind of that a relationship building piece that you and I talked about. So, really 4 quick tips to make your students with experience in foster care a success. Number 1 is inclusive language. And this is where, we talk about our students as students first. So rather than saying foster kid, foster child, that we want to talk about students with experience in foster care and put that student first. On a number of levels, this is, a value that we have as Fostering Success Michigan as the Center for Fostering Success. But I also think it's so important that we send our students that message that they are students. That is their job. They are here to be students, and that we want to approach them in that role. the other things, foster care, that's an experience. That's not your definition. And so there may be many other things that they, use to define themselves. It's not just foster care. Number 2 on here is reducing the stigma of foster care. We have a great guide, our Getting to Know Students from Foster Care guide, that provides just a nice overview of a variety of the experiences that young people from foster care have across the 7 life domains. We really want our students to feel like and really understand being in foster care isn't their fault, that they didn't do anything wrong to get into foster care, and that it's safe for them to say, I'm in foster care, this might be what's going on, and I might need some help. I think one of the challenges that we see, and this really goes to number 3 here, know professionals in your area who can provide additional support. So many of our students who are in foster care, in part because of the multiple moves, but I think in part because their behaviors are maybe seen as defiance and not really looked past to see what's driving that. And so they miss that sometimes they have learning disabilities. So we see a lot of undiagnosed learning disabilities, and many of those students then end up, showing up on our college campuses, and, somebody might go, hey, I think you might want to get tested because you might have a learning disability. And the student has that aha moment of, okay, so it wasn't that I was like a bad kid, it was that like I didn't understand how to do math, and so I got frustrated, and when I don't have a lot of support around me saying it's going to be okay, we'll help you get through this, when I get frustrated I go off the charts. And so I think really understanding that utilizing those professionals who might be experts in other areas. So if you have folks in your school who are experts in special education who maybe can say, hey, can you come in here and just visit with a student a little bit, just see maybe should they get tested, and should we look beyond that, bringing those people in to help you kind of problem solve your students. I think in a lot of ways our role as the adults in our students' lives are to help put together the puzzles of our students. And educators, you're going to have huge pieces that we all need to know about to help the student be successful in the long term. So thinking about how, from the education setting, you can pull in your other puzzle solvers. And number 4 here is learn about what you can do in the classroom to support students. Vaughn mentioned our guide, Getting to Know Child Welfare for Educators. This guide is, again, very comprehensive. It was developed with this toolkit in mind. Vaughn consulted on it. Brenda Pickett consulted on it. And it really kind of helps for you educators out there who may be kind of going, yeah, this all sounds really great, but I don't even know where to start. It gives you some places to start, and I think gives you also some contextual information to understand what some of those experiences that students are having may be like, what that journey through the foster care system can look like. So if you're hearing a student talk about, oh, I have to go to court, or I have to go to visit, my birth mom, or, whomever, my siblings, what does that actually mean, and how does that fit into kind of the overall life for the student? As we move on here, we have our higher education support efforts. As many of you know, or maybe you don't know, but get to know now, Michigan has and is growing every day more campus-based support programs. We currently have 14 campus-based support programs on our higher education campuses specifically for students from foster care. We have an additional 5 campuses that have designated campus champions, and then we have over 60 financial aid campus champions. And so there's a lot of higher education support that's really emerging for our students. And, especially as you are maybe talking with those juniors, sophomores, seniors, and you're kind of talking about forward thinking, helping them plan, maybe seeing beyond life that feels like it's everything when you're in high school, letting them know that there is support for them in college, and that college is for them, they belong in college, and that there are people who want to be connected even before they get to college to help them get there. some of these financial resources that we have listed, we've done webinars on our financial resources in the past. The big ones that I always like to highlight are the Education Training Voucher, ETV. ETV offers up to $5,000 a year for full-time enrolled students. We have the tuition incentive program that many students are eligible for, and this is something I'm sure most of you are aware of, not necessarily specific to students from foster care, but definitely something that if you're an educator, to check in and make sure that students in foster care are aware that they are likely eligible for this. They may not get that tip letter because they may have moved. We've talked about this in the past. The Fostering Futures Scholarship, just another last resource to kind of point you to. This is a scholarship that's unique. It's specific to Michigan scholarship and Michigan higher education institutions. This scholarship doesn't have an upper age limit. So we know many of you educators, you stay connected to your students for a long time. So if you have a student out there, maybe they're in college, maybe they're an out of college youth, didn't maybe make it to college and are just a little bit older now, there's no upper age limit for the Fostering Futures Scholarship. So we absolutely want our students to know that they can utilize this if they were in foster care on or after their 13th birthday. So it's just a great benefit. All of these resources and more are available in our financial aid guide for students from foster care. This guide can be found here. This guide can also be found on our website as well. I want to mention a couple things. So helping students understand their rights. So I mentioned early on the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, and this was actually an amendment to FERPA. We know that as educators, we're very much bound by FERPA. You mentioned the concerns about, not wanting to share too much. With the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, it really kind of helped cut through some of that red tape that inhibited child welfare workers from talking with the teachers and the education staff about the challenges that the students had. Or are having. And, with the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, you as an educator and education professional can actually help to facilitate if a student is transferring to your school. You can help to facilitate getting records from the previous school, or you can help to prepare a student to transfer if they're maybe, going to be moving on to a different school. So just, really understanding that there is a role for the professionals. One thing that I always like to highlight here is, if you are an educator and you're having, meetings with traditionally parents or caregivers, make sure that you include or have inclusive language for relatives, for foster parents, and even for case managers, other professionals and supportive adults who might be there to help that student in their education, journey. They might be the people that actually are going to come and, sit in and say, okay, how is so-and-so doing in, biology? Okay, so, we have some challenges. All right. And it may be in Michigan, it may be an education planner. It may be an MYOI coordinator who's going to come and be able to help kind of build those bridges for that student between the education staff and, their kind of real world life outside of that. Sure. One last piece is the McKinney-Vento. You mentioned the issue of transportation. How do we get to school? This is an issue that comes up a lot. And I just want to say Michigan has some excellent McKinney-Vento policies that actually can support young people in foster care. If they have not had a stable placement for 6 months or more, they are able to access McKinney-Vento funds to help them with those transportation issues to maintain them in their home school. So, checking in with your McKinney-Vento liaisons at your school, letting them know that, hey, I have this student, maybe they move to a different foster home, a group home, what have you, but they're connected at this school. Maybe they're playing on a sports team. Maybe they're playing, maybe they're involved in an after-school club. Maybe they just have a strong group of peers there. You want to keep them connected. There's resources out there to ensure that those students can stay in their home school. The last thing that we have here are education resources for students not eligible for ETV. And this is, for those of you who may be doing the planning with your students, that college access planning, understanding that, not every student necessarily is going to meet the qualifications, but that there are financial resources. There are also programming resources at the college level that can help support students. Several of our campus support programs have eligibility beyond sort of the constraints of ETV. Another thing that we don't have on here, but we'll probably likely add, is TRIO programs. And I don't know, Vaughn, if when you were in the schools, if you interacted with TRIO programs at all and, saw any kind of support that way, or if you're familiar with, the work, especially in the pre-college side.
Yeah, well, no, not when I was as an administrator of the high school, more now working with the Kalamazoo Promise. I do interact with folks that work in the TRIO programs and helping students make those transitions. So I see that more now. It probably would have been more our guidance team that was working with those individuals when I was at the school and stuff like that. But as an administrator, I didn't work with them as much. Now knowing a lot more about the nature of TRIO programs and what their goals are, I could easily see as an administrator having a much better connection with them at the high school level. It's just another added support, and it's another way to help students make that transition to college that really seems to be so difficult for so many.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's, such a great resource, and one, my guess is, because I know TRIO has actually just in the last couple years, I want to say, changed their criteria, specifically stating that they will serve students with experience in foster care and students who experience homelessness. And so this is something that, I think even a couple years ago people didn't know, weren't aware of, and so now that's changing, and we just want to help get the word out about that resource. So this is our toolkit. We hope that you come back and visit this. We hope that you give us some feedback. What I just want to say, if nothing else, read these top 4 quick tips. I think that these are things that you can just keep in your pocket, just tuck in the back of your mind. So when you see that student and you think, gosh, it just seems like something else is going on, that you can, start to think about, maybe they are in foster care, and how can I create a space where they feel like they can be successful. Great. So we are going to go back to our webinar here and take some questions. So we have a variety of questions. One that came in, so specifically, I think the question is from Shannon. Do students need to be from Michigan to benefit from the programs you mentioned? So if this is meaning the campus support programs, I will direct you to our higher education resource guide. Some of those campus support programs are specific to students in Michigan. Some of them are not. Some of them are open. So it's going to be sort of an individual situation. I encourage you to reach out to the campus coaches that are listed in those programs, and really just kind of see what they might be able to do. The funding that's available, so the ETV, Education Training Voucher Funding, is a federal funding source. So that's available for any student who's experienced foster care that falls within the ETV criteria, anywhere. And so that would definitely be something. TIP and the Fostering Future Scholarship are Michigan-specific scholarships. Let's see. So another question. Let's see. As a professional who does outreach work, what are some of the best techniques for connecting to the K through 12 setting, which sometimes can be a challenge? So I don't know if you have some thoughts on what are some good techniques, maybe, so if you're an outreach worker, or maybe you're in the child welfare side, or maybe you're a community partner that has some resources to offer, how can you connect with those K through 12 folks?
There are typically in each school district, there are folks that work in what's called central office. And in central office, anywhere from assistant superintendents are those who work with student services, kind of dedicated to making sure that the overall supports are in place for students to be there. So I would start there. I would start with the student services personnel at the school district that you are working with to see if, one, they're aware of supports, two, see what already may be in place. We did find on a number of occasions that a lot of great work had been done, supports were in place, just didn't know how to get to them.
Mm-hmm.
So you might start there as well. If you feel like you can't go there, I would start with my administrator in my school, and then ask the administrator in the school, exactly if they could help find more supports for whatever the situation is you're facing. And then those folks in student services are really dedicated at the district level to try to make sure that those supports are there and those connections are there. And we found that bringing up new situations as they presented themselves, we had to go out and make new relationships with people that worked in those spaces every day.
Mm-hmm. And that's great. And, I think just I want to encourage anyone that maybe is a community-based partner, a child welfare partner, don't be afraid to come to your school, introduce yourself, let them know who you are and the resources that you can offer. I just think that's such a huge, huge piece. Let's see. So we have a question here. Let's see. Are there, this is a tough one. Are there other ways for teachers to learn that a student is in foster care besides asking them? I know I will say this is tough because we have done a lot of asking as Fostering Success Michigan around the different schools, and to see if there's ways that they can identify if a student is in foster care. We were actually working with Brenda Pickett prior to her retirement here in Kalamazoo to kind of find out some of those answers. Interestingly enough, Brenda was able to pull in the student transfer forms when a student transfers into your school. About half of for the high schools, these are public high schools here in Kalamazoo County, about half of the high schools have a question that says, is the student in foster care? Half of them don't. And, so it begs the question, okay, well, why isn't this uniform? That's one issue. But for those schools that don't, how are you finding out about this information? And I don't know if you have any insights, maybe other ways that folks could find out this information.
Yeah, once again, unless there was an issue that was presenting itself in a lot of cases, you didn't go in depth about a student situation. And if a student was then struggling, on many cases, you, one, talk directly with the student, and or if you had situations that required it, you brought in the student's support network. So you might find out that way too, but a lot of times if it's a family member or someone that is end up there working with, that still isn't always revealed. Everybody doesn't come in these days with the same last name anymore, even though they're related. So that still yet doesn't give you that true indicator. I would be talking with a guidance counselor. So people that have a knowledge typically of situations like this are guidance counselors, people that have been sought out by the student themselves when they're having situations or issues, and or the student does have a record with the school. And through a guidance counselor, you could find that out. So if you're experiencing something with a student and you're really just trying to make a relationship, hey, I can't seem to, cover any ground with this student, or I want to know a little bit more, going to the guidance counselor and talking to someone in the guidance office to ask for a little more information surrounding the student, a lot of times can reveal answers that can help you move forward.
And I would just say, if you're in your school and you're not sure, okay, how do we find this information out? Check those student intake forms, and if you don't have that question on there, talk to your administration about seeing if you can get that question on there. I think it's something that it's a checkbox. We have lots of checkboxes on lots of forms, but it's a checkbox that is important to our students. Absolutely. All right, so one last question, and then we're going to go to get some feedback from you all. So this question is about if FSM ever holds trainings for foster parents to build knowledge and awareness about opportunities to connect students with resources. And what I will say, I know prior to doing this webinar, I was walked in, and Vaughn and one of my colleagues, Jananne Zeller, were talking about some trainings that they are going to look to pilot in the Kalamazoo public schools maybe here, and just see. I think that we are, as Fostering Success Michigan, always interested in reaching out to new communities to share this information. We absolutely want to help you all feel resourced and supported to work with your students. So if you would like us to send you information, we can absolutely do that. And if anybody is out there working with foster parent groups, please contact us, let us know. We would love to be in contact with some of those foster parents, caregivers skills and help you feel equipped to support the students that you are working with in your daily life. So with that, we need your feedback. Fostering Success Michigan is always interested in hearing from you, hearing what you liked, what you didn't like, what you would like to see changed. So we have some polls. I'm going to look over here. We have our polls open. So if you can select one, if you are attending this webinar, this is just going to help us gauge how many people are watching this webinar, viewing this webinar. We know for many folks, you may be at your desk alone, but you may also be, sitting with a couple other folks in your office, maybe a classroom of folks. So it looks like we have the majority of you that have answered that you are alone, though we have a few people. It's 2 to 4. Great. We love to hear that you're watching this in groups. And now we have our second poll. How likely is it that you will visit the FSM website and utilize the Child Welfare for Educators Toolkit? From highly likely to highly unlikely. Notice number 1 is highly unlikely. Number 5 is highly likely. Wonderful. So it's looking like likely, highly likely, not sure. And if you're, if as you looked at the toolkit and you're seeing that maybe there's a few things that you'd like to see, let us know. We love that feedback. You will get a survey after this that just kind of gathers some more information from you. So if you have specific asks, please let us know through that survey. Next question, here we go. Has today's webinar increased your understanding of the role education staff play in supporting students from foster care? 1 strongly disagree to 5 strongly agree. We hope that while this webinar, we only have an hour with you, maybe brief, we do hope that maybe if you're an educator out there and you have been looking for resources or looking for ways that you can increase the support that you can offer your students, that this webinar has supported you. And it looks like most of you say agree. Wonderful. And I promise we only have 2 more questions left. If you need to find more information or resources about how to support your students in foster care, would you know how? Looks like most of you are saying yes. That is fantastic. Oh. And one thing I just want to say, please make sure that you download the guides, that you print those out, that you send those around. If you would like hard copies, let us know. We can send you some hard copies to your schools. We would love to help provide you with those resources. And last question, would you recommend this webinar and or toolkit to another professional or educator? It's looking like we have highly likely or likely, highly likely. Wonderful. Fantastic. And again, we just thank you so much for your feedback. This is always so helpful for us. We really do take this feedback and, we take it back to our team. We talk about it. We talk about what we can do to improve. We're always seeking to find ways to serve you better. That's why we're here. That's why we bring in amazing experts. And I just want to say thank you so much to Vaughn for being here with us. It's so wonderful to have you. I think really hearing from somebody who has been in this work, been in the classrooms, been in the schools, you walk the talk. You don't just, say what you think we want to hear. And we learn from you. And thank you for sharing your learning with others. So thank you so much for coming today. Thank you to all of you. We hope you have a wonderful afternoon.